All right, guys, welcome to 2/10ths Left. I'm here with Black Plague Precision today. We're talking about getting into long range shooting. Um, so let's dive right into it. Mac, how you doing today, brother?
Living the best life I can possibly live because it is a Wednesday at 1 o'clock and I get to talk about shooting. So you can't do much better than that, I think, in this industry.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, if it's any kind of day where you get to get out there and you really get to shoot or talk about shooting, it's hard to beat, right? I mean, we're all here for the goal of putting rounds down range and hitting the target, right? You in a slightly different manner than myself, and it's any day you get to do this instead of a desk job. I mean, come on, how
Yeah,
great is that? It's hard to beat.
it
Um,
is. It is. I love being able to go out to shoot. Now, do I wish I could do it more? Absolutely. That's the goal, right? I think for both of us to be able to get out there more. But second best is at least jumping on with somebody and talking about shooting.
oh my
So
God,
I'll take
right?
it for now.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Um, So I guess I'd love to start with hearing how you got into long range and why you're pursuing this insanity that that is hitting targets really friggin' far away.
Yeah. So I grew up an athlete,
Mhm.
always like I think born very competitively.
Yeah.
I just was always really wanted to compete, and I was always super serious about it, like way too serious for children, like that should be.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I was in maybe third grade, you create like little soccer leagues in for lunch. I don't know if you remember, you guys did that, but we would do, it was like a school sanctioned little soccer thing that happened at lunch.
Yep.
And I was literally so intense about it that at the break I would have people running soccer drills, and then we would compete I was so serious about it, it was crazy. But yeah, I've always been super like very, I love being fit, I love getting out and doing activities. And when I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. I was in the Boy Scouts for a short period of time,
Okay.
and I went to a camp. And at that camp, you do merit badges. And so I signed up for the ones that I thought sounded the coolest, which was shooting, archery, and then I had to do one more. So I did underwater basket weaving.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, so it was a whole thing, but I really enjoyed the archery. I thought that was super cool, making your own arrow and learning the different heads and stuff. In the shooting one, I just for some reason had like a natural act for it. You had to, at the end, you had to shoot like 10 rounds in a quarter in order to like get your merit badge. And I think it was probably like 25 yards or something like that. It wasn't
Yeah,
super far, but open sights. And I shot in a nickel.
that's awesome.
And in my head, I just thought, I think that's pretty good. And
That's pretty damn
from
outstanding if we're honest
yeah, I
about it,
just thought,
right?
oh, that's pretty good. And so I sort of, I didn't pick up another rifle for years and years because I just wasn't in a position to shoot. I didn't live where you could shoot. I wasn't around people who shot, but I really like it stuck in the back of my head as something that I thought I would enjoy. And then the few couple times that I got to shoot with friends, um, I saw it and I was like, or I did it and I thought, oh, this is pretty fun. Like I'm still pretty decent little shot. And then I wanted to join the Marines. I was in college and I wanted to be a Marine Scout sniper. I felt like I had the physical acclimate for it. I
Yeah,
feel
of
like I
course.
had the discipline and the the mental toughness for it. I wrestled in high school, a very competitive wrestling program that I was in. We had national champions that I wrestled in our program, state champions. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so I joined, our university didn't have like NOROTC,
Mhm.
but the greater area did. And so I sort of started doing training. I went and took the ASVAB and was sort of prepping for that. And two things happened. The first thing is I ran in while I was lifeguarding. I ran into a Marine sniper.
Okay.
He showed up to the pool randomly. He had a hog's tooth on. I went up to him and I was like, "Excuse me." I was like, it was like seeing a celebrity for me, legitimately. And I was like, are you a Marine? Like, are you a sniper? And he's like, "How do you know that?" Like, this child who's at this university. So we talked a little bit, and then he's like, "You're an idiot. Like, don't get a college degree and then go go do that." And I was still young and still dumb, and I was like, "I'll probably still do that."
Oh yeah.
And then I was wrestling in high school or in college still. I was doing Olympic lifting. And towards the end of my time there, I started having issues in my back and my glute. I went and got x-rays and they're like, "Oh yeah, you have a lower compressed spine and that's going to be a problem. And you're not going to be able to ruck, 80-pound packs and all
No,
that
no, of
stuff."
course
So
not. That would be honestly that
yeah,
would be ridiculous trying to do that, right?
yeah.
With that kind of an injury. Holy
Um,
shit.
So I did all this weird stuff. Like I would do, like I had an 80-pound vest and I would wear it for like a whole day to classes, like
Yep.
walking, like weird stuff. Like I was the weird guy for sure. I would do snail crawls in like my parents' property, like half an acre, just like practicing because I thought, oh, that's how like I got intense about it, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
And once I couldn't do that, I sort of wasn't really sure what I was going to do with shooting until I discovered competition shooting. And so that's sort of, I'll end it there because I definitely want to hear your story too and how you got into it. But it was like finding competition shooting
Mhm.
and realizing like, oh, I can still be athletic. I can still do something that's sort of in the realm of what I wanted to do. And I sort of put my passion there, but it took about 10 years of researching and being able to get to a point where I could afford to shoot competitively.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I'm at now. And we're going to talk a little bit about like how to get into the sport on the cheap, because I think that's what a lot of people need. You look at those rifles behind you, that's not on the cheap.
No,
You know what I
no.
mean?
Those are
Yeah.
those have some coin put into them.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I think we're really similar in that like hyper competitive nature, right?
Mhm.
Like I was one of those little kids. I grew up playing baseball. I grew up playing lacrosse. Played lacrosse through my senior year of high school. Um, had thought about playing collegiately, but also wanted to go to art school to be a photographer. Um, so that really like those didn't go hand in
I like
hand.
that dynamic a lot.
Yeah,
Like
right.
I'm super athletic lacrosse guy, but I'm also very artsy, which is funny because
Mhm.
I did 4 years of art
Yeah.
in high school. Now I also did like automotive and stuff like that, and
Yep.
we had welding in my school.
Oh,
But
see,
I
I
was very much
wish.
the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I did photo, I did like video and editing, which is funny because that's where I ended up, professionally
Hmm.
um, being a camera operator. But I did drafting and I did a whole bunch of like woodworking, other kind of tech classes because I've had ADHD my whole life, but I didn't really get a diagnosis until a year or so ago as an adult.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Classes that I liked, I could do really well in and I could pay attention, I could focus. But if you put me in a math class, I was fucked from go. Um, because no matter what I did, I couldn't make myself pay attention. Now, that being said, that's funny considering the sport we're here talking about is 100% math. Now,
Hmm.
granted, it's practical math, it's physics and it's trigonometry. Um, but like, if you were telling me I had to go do geometry and algebra, oh my god, I wanted to die.
If they would have taught it around shooting, though, I might have.
Oh my god.
Like I liked math, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't like great at it. But if they could have made it more practical, like shooting, I might have paid more attention.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
right. And I mean, I was one of those little kids who like I ran around playing army with cap guns and like all that dumb shit that kids
Mhm.
tend to do. Um, but when I got older, I got really into competitive paintball to the point where I was traveling to matches, tournaments around the country on teams, beating myself. And I did that until I was probably 25 or 26 years old.
What years was that?
That started in 2005, 6, and I wrapped that up in like 2014, 15. I
Dude,
did.
I wonder if you ever competed against my buddy. His name's Greg Seaworth.
Oh my God.
He
Yeah. Yeah, I know
he was a
Sewers.
on a bunch of the world teams, the national. Like
Yeah.
he has all these huge trophies.
Hmm. I
Um,
can't remember who he
w-
played for, but I know I've
well, he was out here in California.
yeah.
So he was playing for somebody in San Diego for a
There
while.
was
Like they have like
there are a ton of teams in San Diego, and then because that was kind
yeah.
of like the hub, and then
Hmm.
Sacramento had a pro team.
Yeah, he was.
Um,
That's where we met. So we
yeah,
were college buddies. We actually lived together.
that's sick.
And yeah, it was crazy. He'd be like, "I'm going to Germany, and I'm going to Asia,
Yep,
and I'm going to Canada." And we actually did a road trip once up to Canada for a clinic he was
that's
running.
awesome.
And we just went up there and had fun. And it was really a 15-hour drive there, 15-hour drive
Oh
back
my
the
god.
weekend before school started, which
Yeah,
was
you
ridiculous.
guys are going up to like the Badlands and just middle of fucking
Hmm.
nowhere. That's really funny. Yeah, so I did that for a
Yeah.
long time. And towards the tail end of that, I met uh, John, who's a shooter on the KI Precision team, and I know he was affiliated with Peterson Cartridges. I don't know if he still is or not. I don't know where that relationship's gone. Um, and his son is actually this year in 24 shooting for the PRS Centerfire World Team out in Colorado.
Wow.
So I mean, they're fantastic shooters. I met John uh, via paintball, and we both kind of figured out we liked shooting, right?
Hmm.
And I learned how to shoot just around 21 years old because I was like, you know what? I wanted to be in the military my whole life growing up. I'm diabetic. I can't. I'm going to go learn this. So I went, I rented a pistol, I shot a whole bunch of 9, walked right out into the pro shop and bought the same pistol that I rented.
Nice.
And the next day went, so I live in Pennsylvania. Concealed carry permits here are really easy to get. I went to the
Sure.
county courthouse. I spent a half hour of my time and $21, and I walked out with my carry permit a half hour later. Um,
That's like a year process in
oh
California.
my
That's
God, right? It's
hilarious.
so
That's
different.
so long.
But so I did that, and immediately I started learning about IDPA and USPSA and
Hmm.
shooting action pistol matches. Uh, and I didn't do terribly. I moved out of that first polymer handgun, which was a Walther PPQ, the year that came out. And I moved into one of the 1911, this 1911 right here. I moved into that as my, first real carry gun, and I started shooting, local USPSA IDPA matches with a single stack 45. And the guys who I was friends with through paintball were like, well, we all kind of saw this thing 3-gun, which is really getting like just starting to get big at that time,
Hmm.
right? This would have been like 2012, 13, 14. So we
Right.
all started shooting local 3-gun matches, and we would be like, it'd be like he would win a match, I would be second, someone else would be in third. The dude in third would win the next match, I'd be in second, he'd be in. So we did was swap top 3 spots consistently.
Mm.
Um, so I got really good at shooting pistols and shooting fast and being active and doing the action shooting thing. Um, but then at the end of 2014 and in 2015, I took a job in Connecticut, which is like California. Uh, all of the competitive shooting I was doing is 100% not worth doing in Connecticut. You can't have more than 10 rounds. ARs were sort of legal, sort of not. So all that stuff stayed with family in Pennsylvania because of the legality of
Right.
living there. Um, and eventually, because of some family stuff with my wife and I, it brought us back to the Pennsylvania area. And as soon as that happened, I started talking again with my buddies who were competing. In the time I was gone, they were all shooting Fclass. And by the time I got back, they were all shooting PRS, going to 2-day pro matches, shooting a ton of single-day regional matches. They are some of the most talented long-range shooters I've ever met. I've never gotten an ounce of bad advice from them, even if it's, hey, fucker, pull the trigger properly.
Right.
So, I think one of the best pieces of advice I got was at a match. I was struggling. I was frustrated. Um, and John turns and looks at me and goes, "Hey, man, you know the fundamentals. You know how to pull the trigger. Sight alignment and trigger press. Do it right." He's like, "Put your body behind the rifle, square up to it, absorb the recoil, and follow through." And all of a sudden, I started hitting targets. And it was like, son of a bitch. Why is it this hard? Now, this is my second season in PRS, or I should say my second full season. And it just kicked off. I had a nightmare first match at Sheepdog Warrior in Catskill, New York. I was very fortunate. I know the guys at Precision Armament. They sent me a brand new muzzle brake, and I wanted to show that the respect it deserved, so I didn't crank the shit out of it when I installed it, which was my biggest mistake, because on the zero line it came loose. My zero was off. Fortunately, it didn't affect my windage, my left and right, but it did affect my elevation. I got that kind of fixed after the first stage, but at that point, my confidence in myself was shot. It was gone. So I had bad wind calls all day. I managed the recoil well, but I did also on certain stages where I wasn't as comfortable let my rifle boss me around, which was a mistake that everyone's going to make at least once shooting PRS, because positional shooting with center fire rifles is not particularly easy. And then at that point now it's like, all right, I know what I did wrong. I know what I need to fix. Now it's just going to my next match, which I believe is going to be a Sheepdog Warrior in early April, and hammering down there. At this point I shoot PRS, I shoot NRL 22 PRS rimfire, and I shoot the IWI gas gun series. Which is
you do a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, in gas gun, I love because it's long range AR. And that league is structured in such a way that, like, if you just have your home defense rifle with an LVPO on it, or LPVO on it, you can show up, you can shoot, you can compete, you can do well. I mean, hell, I think the overall match winner this year, that guy was in the sniper division shooting a 6 arc. But the guy who took second overall for the year was shooting a 17-inch barrel with like a 1-8 or a 1-10 in the recce class. And their league breaks down so that the sniper division is any bolt-action rifle or semi-gas gun under 30 cal that is not 223 5.56. And then DMR is any 223 5.56 or 308 that is, an AR-15, AR-10 with no restrictions on it. And recce is you can't attach anything to your rifle aside from like a sling in your optic. You can only have a maximum of 18-inch barrel. You can have a maximum of 10 power optic, and you can only use one shooting bag on the stage. So you don't have a bipod, which means you'd have to use something like the puff pillow over here to prop up the front of your rifle and do, a more triangular hand on stock. My first season doing that, I shot recce. I loved it, but I realized shooting PRS and the rimfire leagues, I approach everything I shoot the exact same way, whether it's rimfire or centerfire. So I built my gas gun up to more closely match the bolt rifles. And now everything I do is the exact same. All the gear I use is the same. The bags I use is the same. My stage planning, my stage prep, legitimately nothing changes between semi-auto or bolt or rimfire. So I
like that.
And I think that's the advantage we have for new shooters too, right? Is find a league that's near where you live and go shoot that, right? So if it's a gas AR league, and you've got like your home defense gun, dude, take that gun and go shoot that gun, right? If you've got a hunting rifle with a varmint barrel or a bull barrel, and there's a PRS or an Fclass near you, like see if that rifle qualifies in one of the divisions and go shoot it, right? Don't expect to do well, but try it, because you're either going to get bit by the bug and dive face first into it, and all hell is going to break loose for you, or you're going to hate it and know it's not for you.
Right. That's what I tell people too, right? Because I think the first and foremost thing for getting into competition
Yeah.
shooting is, well, I mean, are you interested in it, right?
Mhm.
Like, do you do hunting? Have you done any shooting with your buddies? Like,
Yeah.
is this something you might have? Do you have a rifle already? And like you said, right? But I always tell people the first thing, like, have you been to Google yet? Right? Have
Mhm.
you looked at what the local ranges are around you? Do you have an outdoor range? How far away is it? And what sort of discipline do you want to do? Now, maybe you can speak better to like how you explain what PRS is to people, but I sort of tell people because I think military
Yep.
is ubiquitous in a lot of like people's minds. And I always tell people PRS is a lot more like the guys that are breaking down the doors, right?
Yeah.
Now they're still great shots. They can still shoot from very far away. But PRS and bench rest are more like the sniper guys.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to decide what direction you want to go because, you know, being a sniper, not to say that I'm anywhere near a scout sniper or anything like that, but the mentality is the same, right?
Yep.
It's patient and it's waiting and it's like, okay, let's wait for the wind to go and let's you know, we want to get everything in the exact spot and we can't miss, and the tolerances are much lower. And so um I think that you sort of have to decide for yourself, well, where do you want to set on that?
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out, can you actually find a place around you that does
Oh
it?
my God, I
And
know.
then does your firearm
Mhm.
qualify to be able to do that, right?
Oh yeah, and I mean
Yeah.
I got real lucky, right? My very first precision rifle match was a Mars match, because that was before PRS had the PRS 22 or Rimfire League, you know, really up and running, and Mars was like the affiliate with that at the time.
And that's
Um,
like the
Mid Atlantic
league.
Rifle Series, and now I think it's
Okay,
Moderns. They changed the name because they're no longer affiliated.
I got you.
But at the time, it was Mid Atlantic Rifle Series, and it was, you know, a regional for PRS Rimfire. I've known Kurt, the owner of KI Precision, for God, I don't know. I've known him since he was a senior in high school, and I was maybe 20 or 21 at the time. So
So
it's
for a while.
yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And so I had a couple of really good freelance jobs, so I had money, and I went and I was like, "Hey, man, build me a 22 and build me a center fire, uh, and make them a match set, so one's a training rifle for the other." And what he did, because he wasn't sure I was going to dive into PRS, he built it in an MDT XRS chassis. He did the barrel. He got the Zematis Origin action, um, so the center fire version of the Rimex. Uh, he did all the internal weights, weighted Arca rail. He did an MDT muzzle brake. You know, really built out that rifle nicely. Put an Athlon Cronus on top of it, so a 4.5 to 29, 34 mil tube by 56. At the time, I learned how to shoot on long range when I was younger by hunters, so shooting minute of angle. So I had an MOA optic, which really I didn't see as a huge hindrance. And I know F-class guys tend to prefer MOA because
Yeah.
it's a more precise uh,
Unit of measurement.
variation. Now all of my stuff is in mils, clearly. Um,
So
but
what was that, like $6,000 for the
oh
rifle
yeah, I
for
think I
one
was
build?
no for both. It was like $6,800 total.
Oh,
Um,
that's nothing. That's
oh
cheap.
yeah, well because
Yeah,
he at the
that's
time was
good.
building up a production line of rifles,
I got
so
you.
that you could buy a production rifle from him and shoot the production class in PRS. Um,
That's awesome.
because of the pandemic, he wasn't able to get actions and supplies fast enough, so it never happened. So I took that rifle to my first match, and like a couple days before, it was like, oh yeah, you got to shoot open because we couldn't make enough of those.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go fuck myself. I think I had like between 15 and 21 impacts out of a
Mm.
104 round course of fire. Now, granted, I timed out a lot. I didn't pull the trigger a lot, but it was a frustrating day because I'd been having at that point success in rimfire, with a CZ 457 in the XRS chassis with an Arkin optic,
Mm.
and I was basically the local leader at my NRL 22 matches. The first 2 or 3 years, I was the open class first place season, season champion.
Nice.
Um, so, I mean, it was, I did really well with that rifle. Now, granted, it's still a 457. Although the only thing stock left on it is the action in the barrel, and the barrel's getting replaced in March. So, not much left on that rifle. Um, but, I shot that first match. I asked why I was having a hard time getting stable on props. And they were like, oh, your rifle's too light. Like, we built that rifle to be either a really good bench rest gun or an okay PRS gun, so you could go and do, kind of either with it. And now that you've played the PRS game and you like it, like that rifle's not right for you. So what we're going to do is get you into the right chassis and do this and do that. And so now, granted, I'm all MDT integrated, as well as Gray Ops Precision, or Gray Ops CNC. I use the Working Man tactical bags. He shoots at local matches with me. He shoots the IWI and the NRL 22 matches. And I'm trying to twist his arm and get him out to a PRS match. He just got the Aero Precision Solus. So I'd love to get him out to a real center fire match. But I hit the ground running and I have never looked back at this point. And I think now for me, and you and I have talked about this, is getting into the reloading game. That's the next level of precision I need to get myself into.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So if you guys are, if you're following along, right, you need to figure out what you're going to shoot with. You need to figure out sort of the discipline you want and try stuff out, right? And sort of like you said, this happens a lot. I did a very similar thing. I wanted to do PRS to start. So I started with that. And I also am not the best example on how to get into shooting because I was willing to wait long enough until I could afford the best.
Yep.
And I don't think that that's a great option for a lot of people. But for me, the way that I wanted it is I wanted to know if I was out there shooting and I was missing, it was because I sucked, not because my equipment sucked. And you don't really know sometimes if you get, equipment that's not quite as good. So when I got my stuff built, I got it built by Wolf Precision,
Yep.
which you and I have talked about. They make, it's called the ACE system, the accurizing chamber extension.
Yep.
Which on a barrel, the portion that is at the end that goes onto the action, that's the chamber. And this allows you to not have to get your barrels chambered every time you take the barrel off. They work with Krieger barrels, and then you can put it back on. And there's some other advantages to it, but I went with, Krieger barrels, one of the best barrels, whether you're shooting Fclass PRS or bench rest or Fclass. I went with a Bat Action Elite,
Yep.
which was a custom made from Bat Action, which again is a very, very high tolerance action that was custom made for Wolf Precision. That's a little more integrated for PRS. It has a different throw. It has a stronger ejection port, things like that, which you don't really need in Fclass. And I went with MDT, same as you.
Oh, yeah.
So I went with the ACC Premier. It was the second gen of the Premier that had been out. And it's the same thing I use now for Fclass. I honestly do not think I'm going to switch out of it. And maybe there's a lot of Fclass guys shaking their head and saying this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But for me, functionally, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Whether I'm going to switch or not. But, the next thing, like you said, is, okay, like, how serious do you want to get about it?
Yeah.
And then you start to throw a lot of money into it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then don't get caught off guard, Don't get caught off guard when someone says you should probably reload.
Well, and I think the huge advantage, right, that a lot of newer shooters to the sport right now have that we probably didn't have at the time that we were getting into it is you have rifles like the Aero Precision Solus and like the Daniel Defense, whatever the hell that one is. And you can get anything custom built like, you and I did, but you've also got the SIG version of the Cross. What is that? The lightweight one.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember.
You're like far more like a dictionary. You know a lot more things like in the industry than I do. I always sort of like really jump into specialized stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I know these, things, but I think sort of the point you're getting at is when, we were sort of getting into it. Like, before the ACC Premier,
oh yeah,
they had the ESS, right? This is MDT.
Yes.
MDT Shooting Sports. they had the ECC, which was just like when you saw it, you're like, whoa, this is a fucking cool looking situation right here. And that's originally what sort of brought me over wanting to build with MDT. And but chassis were really just like starting to pop off. A lot
Yeah.
of people, they were doing stocks and they were betting them, and they were just like finding out like you really don't want your barrel touching
Yep.
anything. And now it's like there's a lot of stuff on the market, and the sports have grown in a lot more popularity, that you can get, like you're saying, really good rifles from companies that are like piecing them together, working with other companies. A lot of these companies put stuff in MDT chassis, and other I mean, you and I are
Oh yeah.
MDT chassis fans, so we're probably going to talk about them a lot.
I
But
mean, so for me, right, when I'm looking at really top notch chassis,
mhm,
I'm looking at MDT either now for me. If and when it's time for me to build a new rifle, it'll be the Elite, right? It's got that
sure,
wider fore end. It's got the stock that brings the barrel into a straighter line, so you're getting recoil more direct into you, where you can kind of see how the stock here drops like a U. That can change the geometry of the how the recoil impulse feels. So I think MDT did a lot of really great stuff with the Elite. By the way, the SIG rifle I was talking about is the SIG Cross, not the Q Fix. They're so goddamn similar. I was fucking it up.
yeah,
But so I would do that. I would go with an impact action. I think for PRS, they're incredibly hard to beat. Um, I have a 25-inch 6 millimeter Creedmoor barrel right now. I think I'm going to stay with Creedmoor, but if I don't, I'll go to 6 millimeter Dasher. I'm going to
sure,
stay in that 6 mil family. They tend to do really well in the wind. They're consistent. It's really hard to beat. You can get good bullets, good casings. There's a lot that goes into 6 mil that's really worth shooting, and they're low recoil, which is even at a Creedmoor, which is a big cartridge, big charge. Um, that's it's relatively light recoiling.
yeah,
I'll go from a 25-inch barrel to a 27-inch barrel, pushing a little more velocity. Right now my round is exiting the barrel at a little over 2,900 feet per second. For a 6 Creedmoor, the advantage of that is you want to be pushing the round at around 3,100 or just over feet per second, right? So that would be the goal, moving into my next barrel, which I think I've got maybe 400 rounds left on this one before I need to rebarrel anyway. So that's in the near to immediate future. Um,
yeah.
but the
And what's
rifle,
a barrel cost for you?
650 ish, give or take.
Yeah, so we're right around the same amount for high end
Yep.
production, heavy contour, like Krieger barrel, which
Yep.
I run, but even like the Brooks barrels and all of them, they're right around that $600 to $800 a
Yeah.
barrel, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
I think Kriegers are usually like in the 6 range every time I've
Yeah,
looked at them for other use. I will say that I go to KI Precision for all of my center fire barrels, and I
right.
know he does Bagara barrels for rimfire. If I had a Bagara, I would run a KI barrel. He's tooling up to do CZ barrels, which is what I'm shooting now for rimfire. Unfortunately, because he wasn't ready when I needed the barrel, I got an International barrels. They're also an excellent, barrel maker. So I'm not really
That's international accuracy or
IBI,
accuracy
International
international.
Barrels Incorporated, I believe.
Oh yeah, 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 IBI, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's another really top barrel.
oh
I
my
was
god.
thinking of the company that actually makes, like, I think it's International Accuracy or Accuracy International, right?
Oh, AI. Yeah, Accuracy International.
Yeah,
They make the fucking Counter Strike gun that everyone.
yeah, they make. I see them come up a lot, right? And
Yep.
I think that's sort of where, like, I still have my eye in PRS as a fan. Now I've sort of transitioned. I don't know if you have this. Like, I used to, I grew up watching basketball as a
Mm-hmm.
Lakers fan, in the dynasty era of
Yep.
Shaq and Kobe, and then grew up watching football. You have Red Zone on. You got
Mm-hmm.
12 games on the big screen and whatever, and I like tennis, and I college wrestling, international wrestling, but I've sort of have moved away completely from like all sports except for shooting sports.
Yep.
And the problem is it's hard to find. That's why I'm like
Oh
obsessively
my
always
god.
on YouTube, it's so hard to find like anything
Yeah,
around it.
absolutely. And I mean, the reality too, one of the reasons that I make, content right now, and I'm sure we've talked about this, is because there's not a ton of PRS content out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes down to like match footage, right?
Yeah.
So I run the trigger cam on all of my rifles. I shoot my rifles. I do minimal editing on any stage that gets posted. It's all done so that you can see what I did, you can see what I'm seeing, and you can see what I either did properly or I did poorly, so that you can assess it yourself, right?
Well, and that's how we became friends, right?
Yeah.
If you guys don't know this, our bromance has started over TikTok, which is the weirdest thing that I think ever could have happened
Oh
for
my
me.
god.
Because I'm like, how do people make friends on social media like that? But
Yeah.
I saw your video, and I was like, I think there were a couple hundred like views on it or
Yep.
something. And I was like, how does this not have 100,000 views on it? And I think I commented something to that effect. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, nobody is putting out video
Mhm.
that looks this good, that has these angles, that's like a dual screen with, and you will see like, I'm a big Philip Vallejo
Yep.
fan. And so that's how I sort of really started following PRS, was through his lens. And even he wasn't doing like the dual screen that you were doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, this is like next level. I'm like, if you're trying to shoot PRS, you have to be watching this guy, because you can watch. And I'm the sort of person that likes to examine and like see, can I pick something
Oh
up?
my god, yeah.
Like you can see how you're pulling the trigger, you can see your body position, you can see how you're placing your feet. And this is stuff that like, I talk about Pete with Impact
Yep.
Shooting, because he's another PRS guy that I
Mhm.
follow, and he puts out courses, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
bought one of those courses, and so I've seen the techniques that are
Mhm.
developed for PRS, and I see you doing them, and I'm like, literally, like, you're doing the sort of stuff that people pay a lot of money
Mhm.
for somebody to teach them, and all you got to do is sort of watch this guy and be like, oh, okay, like on this stage, like I should, what do they call it, Christmas tree in my
Yeah.
legs, like whatever. So yeah, that's how we became, that's how we like started met each other,
Mhm.
because I was just generally like a big fan of like what you were putting out. And then you started telling me that you were in the filming
Yep.
game, and I was like, yes, like that's exactly what we need. We need people that like take the filming side a little more
Yep.
seriously,
Yeah.
to help people.
I mean, like some of the best long range shooting content I've seen out there is like the rimfire guy who does Pursuit of Accuracy. I really like
Mm.
his content. But MDT puts out really top notch content on
Yeah,
their YouTube page. I mean,
nobody puts out better content than MDT.
yeah.
They literally, I want to shake their media guy's hand, their
Oh
marketing
my
guy's
god, I
hand,
know.
because and they're constantly doing it too.
Mhm.
That's the thing, right? Like, because I remember they started that like really heavy, maybe 2 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe a little further back, but around 2 years ago. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's a cool video. And then I'm like, every week they have a new like, and they just did that
Yep.
the 6 foot rifle,
Yeah.
the
Oh
six
my.
foot barrel,
Yeah. Yeah. They're
like
talking
stuff
about
like that. Nobody's
velocities.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
like nobody's doing
and I
that.
think they did too. Muzzle deviceless rifle. General recoil. Like
Mhm.
how many foot pounds are you feeling or whatever.
Yeah, with
The six
with the
five.
measure, and then they
Yep.
did the scope. The scope was like 4 feet
Yep.
above,
Yeah.
just like crazy stuff. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great.
I mean, and they did the one where like they picked the gun up and like carried it by the scope, and then they put pressure
Yeah,
coming down on the optic. Right. There's all
I still
these.
won't do that even after that
Oh,
video.
I manhandle my gun
I
by the
still won't do
scope all
it.
the time. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I
Um,
will not do that.
so all of my guns, like they look nice right now, but I treat them like they're a tool, right? So they get banged off of props, they get smacked around, right? And I try to keep impacts on the optic to a minimum so that I don't have a zero shift.
Mm.
But aside from that, man, like PRS, you have 105 seconds, or really a minute and 45 seconds. Gas gun, I have 90 seconds, so a minute and a half. And NRL
Mhm.
22, I have 2 minutes, which is
Right.
an exorbitant amount of time when you're used to shooting 105 seconds or 90.
Right.
But the reality is like you're going fast. You can't care about how good your rifle looks because you're going to beat the shit out of it, right?
Right.
It's going to get smacked around. So
That's a
yeah,
good difference from F class, right? Because we get I have to look at it again. 18 minutes to
Yeah.
shoot 20 rounds, like a
Yeah.
lot of time,
Oh yeah.
right? And that's what I mean. Like they'll like you'll see people. I happened to be partnered up with the guy who was on the national team at one point,
Hmm.
and so I was just like watching them, and they sit for a very long time. They're just sitting. You're like, are
Yeah.
you going to take a shot? Like, because you have to be paying attention at the target to call out their shots, and he just sat for such a long time because they're waiting for the right wind
Yep.
conditions. And I like to think it's like our rifles stay a lot more like in showroom condition
Oh yeah.
because we're literally from the case to the ground back to the case, where you guys are like on these barricades and you're going in stuff and out of stuff.
Yep.
And you're right, like your stuff's going to get a lot more jacked up than ours is for sure.
I mean, the analogy I like to use is that you guys are driving the F1 cars, right? They're super highly tuned. They do one thing, and they absolutely crush at the one thing they do. And then the PRS shooters, we're shooting rally cars, right? Like
That's a great, that's
like,
a great, great comparison.
yeah, we're off road. We're beating the crap out of them. You're not coming out of a single match unscathed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole bottom of my center fire's chassis is all beat to hell.
Mm-hmm.
The barrel has like dings and nicks in it from being smacked off shit all the time. Like that, these guns, they are what they are. They're outstanding for what they are, but I've got a target that is as small as 1 minute of angle to as large as like 4 minutes of angle at the large, right? They're small, but they're not tiny, right? And granted, you can go as far as the range has available for you to shoot, but typically you're only going to like 1,000 yards. Sometimes you'll get 12 or 1,400 if you're lucky. And then you get match directors like the guy who runs Geisley, where their targets are tiny, and there's a ton of them and high movement, right? But what's also nice about PRS is like every match director has the way they do things. So sometimes you're doing high movement with low targets, or low movement high targets. And there's a lot going on, so it makes it really interesting, right? It gives you a look into the mind of the match director, who is also a shooter, right? So I really like going to MKM out in Kennerdell, Pennsylvania. I think the guys who own that range and who match direct out there put on some of the best PRS and rimfire matches in the country. I like Sheepdog. The facility in upstate New York it's really nice. He's a really nice match director. He's understanding. He gets it. He's a shooter too. I mean, the guys who own MKM are all pro shooters, so they get it. They're some of the best shooters I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I see that range. You and I talked about this a little bit. I see range come up all the time as like a prominent range that people want to shoot PRS at all across the country. They want to go to this range and shoot there. So it's very cool that you're like, you're near where they're at.
Well, just about 6 hours isn't near, but it's same state.
I count that as near because I would have to drive from California.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Like even for PRS here, when I was like looking into it, the we're in the Southwest region, and the like regional championship that's held here is held in Arizona.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's close. Like I thought I was gonna have to go to the middle of the country to do these, right? So for me, I'm like, that's fine. I mean, down to LA is like whatever, an 8 hour and then over. So
well, it's because LA is a clusterfuck. Let's not compare that.
Yeah, that's true.
Traffic there's terrible. Oh my god. But I mean, being that you're in NorCal, I'm surprised you didn't look more at shooting in the Pacific Northwest region, because that I feel like would have been a shorter trip, right? Like shooting in Oregon and Washington State.
Well, I'm actually almost in the middle. I'm in the Central Valley. So the California gets divided up into NorCal and SoCal, but
there's a
in
huge
reality,
central.
there's four regions really, and I'm near the Central Valley. So our agriculture feeds like 70% of the country.
Yep.
That's out in this area, and so that's sort of why like I'm around shooting quite a bit. I'm not like in San Francisco.
You're in the red
LA.
part of California.
Yeah. And so a lot more rural in the areas that I'm in, and the the competition. So luckily, this is a good example of the expansion of PRS, right?
Mm,
Because I think, and I don't know the history distinctly, but I would say that like bench rest and F class
yeah.
were probably a lot more prominent because
Mm,
it's a lot closer to like what you would learn in the military,
yep.
right? And I think PRS has really started to develop and catch fire over the last, 5 to 8 years, and it's developing a lot more. And so there were no PRS NRL matches in my area at all.
Yeah.
You had to go down to sort of like San Luis Obispo area, which is about 4 to 5 hour drive for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's called Aval or something, AVAL or something like
Okay.
that, but in the middle of the state, really like in the middle of the state.
Yeah.
And then you had to go down to Southern California, and then you would have to go into Arizona, right? Those are like it. And now there's two places literally in my area that do PRS like qualified matches, and that's
That's awesome.
the club that or the range I'm at, which is Sac Valley, ran by the Folsom Shooting Club. And then there's another private range out here that's literally like one is 40 minutes in one direction, the
Yep.
other one's a 40 minutes in the other direction for me. So I'm right in the middle of those. And that's called I think NorCal
Yep.
Shooting. I think it's called NorCal Shooting Club, and they now have sanctioned things. So it's really grown a lot in the area, and rightfully so, because it's generally more exciting, right? I mean, just to watch and to engage in, it's more exciting
Well, and I think
shooting sport.
something too that really drove a lot of people to it, right? You're talking about how F class is what the snipers learn. And that's really for a long time exactly what they were doing. But in the global war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan, where a lot of the teams were special forces, Navy SEALs, they were kind of running and gunning through mountains and urban environments. They were doing a lot more shooting in a manner of
Sure.
the PRS style,
Yeah.
right? So like the puff pillow, where you're using as stock stabilization on like a rooftop prop, or you're using when you're in a higher kneeling position to kind of help stabilize. They were realizing, oh well, like I can just take my jacket off, ball it up, and put it under, and do the same thing with that when I'm deployed. uh, so you saw an influx of really outstanding shooters from the military start shooting PRS. And there's the civilian, I mean, the civilian population is so much larger than the military population. That's kind of what you see filter into the way they do things anyway. It's like in 2012, 13, and 14, when a lot of tier 1 units that were, breaking down doors and going into rooms were having the best 3-gun shooters teach them fast target acquisition and driving the gun and kind of doing all these things. And the reality is competition drives innovation, right? So the military is able to look at like, okay, that works, but we can't use all of it. So we're going to take what works and we can apply it to us. And then some of the stuff that they're doing as competitors that like doesn't work for us, we're just going to throw that out.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Well, I
what
remember,
helps.
I don't know if you have this same thing too, but I remember the only competitions I could really ever find were military
Oh
competitions.
yeah, the like
That was all I
snipers
could ever find.
challenge
Yeah,
stuff.
that was it. Like I couldn't
Mhm.
find like PR, like none of that stuff. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I'm granted, like this was, back when YouTube was really starting to gain popularity,
Yeah.
but I could only find like military style shooting stuff. And
Yep.
then um they came out with a couple of shooting shows where they would get people from different disciplines of
Oh
shooting,
my God,
and
what
they
was it?
would
Top Shot.
top shooter,
Top Shot.
top shot. Yeah, they
Yeah.
came out with top shot. And so like stuff like that, I was like, really got me like in the zone. But you're right, it took forever for that to like transition over to the
Yeah.
public. And that totally makes sense. Yeah, what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I think it's a beautiful thing, right? Because now granted, none of my rifles are legal for F class, but like F class has its rimfire series too. ELR has a rimfire series where you're shooting 22. PRS has a rimfire series, right? So if someone's really looking at getting into this style of shooting and they don't feel like jumping into a $2,000 rifle for an off the rack gun, right, and
Yeah.
like a $1,200 optic plus, they can grab their 1022 or their CZ or their Ruger Precision 22, and they can go out and they can try an F-Class 22 or Extreme Long Range 22 or PRS 22 match, an NRL 22, and go and kind of get a feel for what stage management and stage prep and like running at a match like that feels like. We at my February NRL 22 match, we had a gentleman come and squad with my normal squad, which is, that's stepping into the heavy hitting squad, right?
I would say you're with a lot of really prominent shooters. That's
that's
a bit intimidating.
My PRS buddies don't shoot NRL 22. They do shoot rimfire, which I have with them the day before Easter. I have my first PRS 22 match of the year with them at the KI match. But like, the gentleman who owns Working Man Tactical has been shooting long range forever. His name's Chris. He's fantastic. I'm going to have, when I send the t-shirt here that's for you and the sun shirt, I'm going to have one of his bags on the way out to you too. But he's been shooting forever. He's outstanding. He shoots with an older guy who is like the squad uncle. His name's Joe. We all call him Uncle Joe as a joke. He's fucking with a semi-auto rifle. He's one of the best semi-auto shooters I've ever met. And then we've got a lot of other really talented, really good shooters that are with us at those matches. And then after that is like my wife, and we get some other people who are newer and learning. So when that guy like jumped into the squad, I was like, oh man, there's like a bunch of us in this squad that are already like, we know we're going to the NRL 22 Nationals in June. Like, that's a big jump for someone who's, I think he said it was his fourth match. And kind of watching him shoot, it was like, hey man, like you should square your hips, square your shoulders, like get behind the gun, differently. When you're in that bladed position, while you're not going to see a huge difference in 22, like the second you pick up a real rifle, you're gonna know it's gonna bully you, that recoil. It's a lesson I learned the hard way. So that's something I immediately was like, hey man, like you should try it this way, because I'm telling you, when you decide that 22 isn't enough, you're going to learn the hard way. And I don't want anyone else to have to learn the hard way the way I did.
Yeah. Well, it's cool though. Like the one thing I've found is I think there's some sort of, there's a perception of gun owners, right?
Yeah.
Depending on who's watching this, but
oh my God.
There's a perception of gun owners, and I won't say that I didn't go in with a little bit of bias on that front, but literally like everybody that I've met has been so nice, so welcoming, and like really encourage, like, hey, come out, like they like people are, they want people to come out so bad.
Oh
right?
my God.
All of these people. Yeah. So it's there. I'm like, oh, well, when I was first getting into it, I was like, oh, I'm like new, like I'm still like getting whatever. Like, oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry. Just come out, like have fun, whatever. And I think that's really encouraging. And I think people need to know that legitimately, like you might think that like people don't want you there because you don't know what you're doing. Like they want you there badly. Now be safe, obviously, and follow the rules and don't do anything dumb. But, ask for help. And, I had to do that same thing. I never scored, a match before, and for us, we were on targets, and so I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, and just candidly, like, tell me what I need to do. I'm a relatively competent person, and let's do this. And so I really and this has been across all disciplines: bench rest, F-Class, PRS. They've all been super nice and really just want people out there shooting.
Oh yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Is I love the shooting sports. I love, I love what we're doing and how we're innovating these things. And that's one of the big reasons why I shoot Gas Gun Challenge, is because it's really important that people don't just see ARs as these black, scary guns, right? Like they are a sporting rifle. You can, in most states, hunt with them. Now you have to do, make your allowances and how you set that up to do that. But like, these they're not just a quote unquote military style weapon, right? They are for the shooting sports, and they are for competition. They're much more complex than that. And so for me, like, it's doubly important to work with companies like IWI or even Geisley, who holds their gas gun challenge, right? And I know there are gas gun challenges out west also. I just don't know who puts them on,
Sure.
because I see them come up on Instagram all the time. So like they're out there, right? And I think supporting, we need to get out of this like tactical dude, competitor and FUD mindset, right? Where like, oh, you only need 7 rounds or in a pistol and 5 rounds in a rifle. No, well, like that's factually not correct, right? And being the dude with nods and a suppressor and all that stuff is awesome, right? Like I have a can. I love shooting my suppressed rifle, but you know, you need to be able to do more than just the one thing you're used to, and you need to step outside of your comfort zone. I was at the range yesterday. I just put a 50 MOA rail on my CZ to get a little more elevation out of my optic, because it's Athlon is great with the Cronus. They tell you you're going to get really between like 30 and 33 mils of elevation in your optic. And with the 30 MOA rail, I was seeing about 22.8 mils. So, all right, if I go to a 50 MOA rail, it doesn't change the height of my optic because the rail is the same height. It's just a different cant. But that gets me back another 5-6 mils. So to shoot targets.
I was just looking at something I was going to share with you that has an
Okay.
adjustable. So the rail adjusts up and down. I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah,
that.
actually,
It's crazy.
I've shot with a gentleman from New Hampshire who has that on his rimfire.
I meant to send it to you, but yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, I got to talk. I wanted to research it more because I'd never seen that. But yeah, you can adjust it up and down.
I've never seen it used, but I've seen it on a rifle. And Steve, the guy who I saw who was using it, said that his rimfire, his 22 long rifle, was doped to 800 yards, which to me that's fucking insane, right?
That's
like I wouldn't really push a 40 grain 22 beyond 350, right? And that's about where PRS 22 and NRL 22 taps out. They're not going to really push you further than that. And even then, that's an unrealistic shot, right? I think with my 22, which is shooting really hot ammo for precision ammo, I'm at like 19 point some mils of elevation, which is ridiculous at 300 yards. It's not realistic. When you get to like 220, 230, and you're in the like 7 to 10 mil range, like that's about right. Like that's 1,000 to 1,400 yard shot with a centerfire rifle. When I compare the data on my 6 mil Creedmoor and my 22 side by side, my 6 mil at 400 yards has the same dope as my 22 at 100 yards. And my dope at 200 yards for my 22 is the same as my 6 mil at 915 yards. So, I mean, that's fairly comparable.
So at 1,000 yards, I'm at 9.1 mils.
Yeah, I think I'm at like 7.8, but I'm probably pushing my round a little faster.
I shoot. My bullets are at about 7. Jesus, that'd be fast.
Like 27.
Like 27.75 is like where I'm averaging.
Yeah,
somewhere around there, and that's mostly because originally I bought a 147 grain match, and I thought, well, if I'm going to reload this, I should try to reload it with the components that come with that.
Yeah.
And that's where they have that ammo set at that speed. And I was like, well, I'm just going to keep it like safe where it's at. But now that I'm going up to Burger Bullets and Lopoa Brass, and I'm going to shoot the 140s, that'll likely end up being that drastically changed. But should we talk about like we said we wanted to jump on and talk about like what do you need to get into the sport? What gear do you need? Granted, like obviously to get into it, you just have to have a rifle that'll qualify. But I think if we could talk about like bare bones, like this is what's going to allow you to be semi-competitive, I think that could be helpful to people.
Yeah, so I think going into PRS, you want a bolt action rifle with a muzzle brake, right? Granted, if it's made in high enough numbers. You'd shoot production. That's a really good one. That gets you your 6mm Creedmoor and any of your kind of crazy calibers. However, there's a tactical division that gives you 223 and 308 as your option. I think that's really advantageous for a lot of shooters because 223 and 308 are widely accessible, right? Even in like a standard just Remington 700 or a Savage. And I know Savage sells a competition rifle that comes in an ACC Premier at this point, which I think is a huge advantage also, right? Because you go and you spend, $1,800 to $2,500 on a rifle, but it comes with everything you need to be successful out of the box.
Right.
And I think that's huge, right? I think after that, something that you would want to use is like Straylock Pro, which I know is blocked by the government right now. You can't buy it or download it. So for anyone who has that already, Straylock is a great entry-level app to do your data and your ballistics. There's also Element Ballistics and a bunch of other ones.
I use the Hornady, like what is that, H2
Yep,
something?
Hornady has one. Applied Ballistics has one. Vortex has one that they're an owner in. I know you as well. We both use Kestrels. I think if you're serious about competing, a Kestrel is the only way to go. You need to have that piece of gear.
Right.
I would recommend that you have a scope with at least a 34mm tube. That's going to give you enough elevation to get up and down. You can shoot minutes or mils. Doesn't matter to me. I was successful with both. And I think you can be successful with both. PRS, everyone shoots mils. You get a 2/10 hold on your optic, which is about 0.6 minutes. And a minute's reticle, you'll get a 1 minute markers. So it's a more precise hold for your wind on mils, which I happen to like. And that's how I got talked into shooting that. And then after that, you need maybe 1 or 2 sandbags, a bipod, and match ammo, right? And mags. As long as you've got mags you can change quick, you've got match ammo, and you've got a decent rifle with a muzzle brake on it, you're good to go. But I mean, for you, F-Class, that is such a specialized game. What would a shooter need to get into that?
So before we jump into F-Class, let's just, so you sort of said already, like, hey, if you have like a home gun and things like that, if it's, especially like if it's a 308 class and you have a 308, like go out there, see what you can do, right? But if we're talking entry level cost, right? Because you're saying, all right, entry level rifle, you can find ones that are an MDT.
Yep.
You're looking at about $2,000 for that, right? Called taxed and shipped and everything in your house. You have a brake on the front. What are you paying for your brakes? Because I've only bought the Eric Cortina brake, and they're not cheap.
So I had an MDT adjustable brake, and that was like $250, maybe a little bit more than that. The Precision Armament Hyper Tap that I'm shooting now is a $250 brake. I didn't pay for that one. They sent that to me. I shot with I believe Keenan is either the owner of the company or the CEO. I shot with him at a gas gun match. I didn't know he was a league sponsor. I just, knew he hadn't shot a lot of precision long range gas gun matches.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, hey man, like here's a bag, do this, try this, approach the stage this way. Doing anything I do with someone who's like newer to the discipline, right? Wanting to help him. And it was during the prize table of the finale match that I found out, like, oh yeah, he's actually like a league sponsor. He owns a big, company.
That's awesome.
Which was really cool, and I reached out to them to ask about that break, and he was like, dude, we're just going to send it to you. Like, what's your address? Which was the nicest thing anyone's done for me, right? I can also say that is the softest shooting muzzle device I've ever put on any rifle. So hands down, if you're going to spend that much money, like, hell yeah, get after that one. But the PRS production rifle division, right, which is your off-the-rack gun, says that new shooters don't always want to compete in the open division. They're rifle cost, division rifles shall not exceed $3,000 US dollars as listed on the company's website, and the optics shall not exceed $2,500.
I
Right?
forgot you guys had price limitations. I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, if we look at that, right, the Sig Cross is listed at like 2,300 bucks, 2,400 bucks, right? And then you get the Savage. So where's I've got the internet running too. So we got Savage Competition. I could spell it even better. Uh, Savage Rifles. Be really great if it would pull up exactly what I'm looking for, but I can't get that lucky. You look and you get that Savage, which comes in an ACC Premier that I was talking about, right? That rifle right now on their web. Well, I'm not quite on their website. I'm on grabagun.com, which is a online retailer. But to get their we're gonna filter this so I get the rifle I want right away. Category, manufacturer, caliber. We're gonna go 6.5 because that's gonna get me exactly what I want. No, maybe not. Son of a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think you're looking between 18 and 22.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. You're on average, absolutely. Yeah, of course, it's not
Because
just a
even
matter.
if you buy, like, guys, even if you buy, like, let's say a Tika, like, in a
Yeah,
stock, or you buy Savage in a
hell,
stock,
you can get a
you're
Tika
going
in
to
a
want to
chassis.
replace you're going to want to put it in a chassis, and you're going to want to probably throw a new trigger on it, and you'll want to put that brake on the front, right?
So production limits you on what you can change on it. I'm pretty sure you have to shoot it as it comes, right? You can't you can't change the stock or the chassis, which is why I recommend things like the Sig Cross and the Savage. I think it's a 110 competition. And then you get stuff like the Ruger Precision competition, right? The RPR. I'd get that in 6mm or 6.5.
The one thing you didn't talk about, which I think is key, and maybe you want to touch on this, is the adjustable butt and adjustable cheek.
Oh my God, yeah. So that
I think a lot of people make a mistake on that, and if you're going to get into competition shooting,
yeah. So the reason I run the MDTs here is because you have that level of adjustability. That cheek piece gives you a repeatable sight picture, which is essential to being able to compete and do really well. I know if I put my rifle down, point it at the target, and I drop my face to the scope, I don't have to go left and right to look for the target. I just got to go up and down on target, close the bolt, and send that round. Right. I run my chassis as short in as I can. What really successful pro shooters have found is that the shorter your length of pull is, the more it helps with recoil management. So I think the minimum length of pull on the ACCs is like 13 and a half inches, which I'm 6'2", right? That is perfectly acceptable for me. My wife, she's 5'4", 5'5". She couldn't run my rifles. They'd be too big for her. She'd have to get their short stock to make them fit her. But I mean, the big advantage to a chassis system is that level of customizability. Can I put weights in it and make the front heavier? Can I put M-lock weights on the outside? Can I adjust the cheek riser and the length of pull? Can I tune it to do what I want it to do? Open class, that's kind of your all bets are off, right? I'm an idiot and I dove right into open class. Not everybody does that. I think you kind of went that same route when you were shooting PRS. But like, if you can get away with shooting production, which is what I had initially intended to do, I think that's what's worth it, right? Because there are companies now making amazing rifles for cheap that give you all the shit my custom guns have for an affordable price. And if you can really swing the bat at that, right? And I mean, the Athlon Cronus, that's a $1,600 optic, right? It's Japanese glass. They're made here in the U.S. They're nitrogen argon purged. They don't fog. They've got a thin Christmas tree reticle, at least in the mills one with the 0.2 mil striations. You could also go with like Apex Optics out of Canada. They make a really great piece of glass. It's like 22 or $2,400. Um, you know, it beats getting like a Night Force and breaking the bank, or getting a Calais, or getting a Zero Compromise, right? Those optics are fucking outstanding in the quality, but you're going to spend $3,000 plus on the scope. You could get a Vortex if you really wanted to. I personally happen to think the Athlons are better glass for the money you pay. So I try to choose where I'm spending my money wisely. I know at this point in my life that when I upgrade optics, it's going to be a Zero Compromise, right? The only other option would be a Calais or an ATACer. They are the three dominant precision scopes for PRS. I know that March, you and I have talked about a couple times, got a crazy zoom, is an outstanding choice for Fclass. But I mean, if you can find a rifle for an affordable price, you can shoot just about anything in PRS. You're going to do better with a bull barrel because your barrel's going to heat up as you're shooting these 10 shots. Oh, holy shit. The Savage in the ACC is $1,300 on gun. Grab a gun.
That's really good.
That's a 20-inch barrel 308 in an ACC Premier. Like, my God. Like, what is... Yeah. My open gun is... If I sold that, it'd be stupid. Right? Like, oh, that makes me so jealous. Because stuff like that was
it's a lot more affordable to get into the sport now, right? That's the nice part of it. But even then, like... You can always find ways to spend more money in this sport. That's the truth.
No
right?
questions asked. You know what I mean? Like, for me, do I need an impact chassis or an impact action and a MDT elite chassis? No, I don't. But I also know that when I get to the point where those little things matter, it's gonna matter, and that money is going to be well spent. Now, I'm a year at minimum away from that, right? I could be 2-3 years from that even still. But, I recognize that, hey, at a certain point, I have to spend what I have to spend to get the gear that I need. There's a reason why I have an MDT Skypod triple pull and double pull. I've also got a long range accuracy bipod and a Harris, and they're all M-LOK bipods. Why? Because you need to have that variation, and you also need to learn what you like, right? The Harris wasn't cutting it. I got the long range accuracy. That is a great bipod. I think for Fclass, if you could connect it directly to your rifle, that is almost impossible to beat. It's amazing for what it is. Not great for what I'm doing, but those Skypods, man, they're expensive, but they're the tits. You know what I mean?
That's what I have. Again, right, because originally I was going to do PRS. I did not cheap out on anything, and I went with the PRS pool, the Skypod, and I want to say it was $800.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like you said, you could get a bipod for $200, maybe even cheaper, used or whatever.
Oh, you could use the MDT ground pod, which I think is $200, or you could use the.
Well, that wasn't out when I was.
Well, yeah,
that's new, right?
Yeah,
that wasn't out.
That's new.
I was starting.
You can use the Atlas bipods. They're affordable. They're a little over $100 usually. You could dive into a what's the company that made M-LOK? Magpul. You get the Magpul bipod. Right. But one of the things that I will say is, like, don't buy something that's like lightweight and cheap just because it's cheap. Buy something that's metal, that's constructed well, especially if you're shooting PRS, because like I said, you're going to end up beating the shit out of that gear just figuring out how to shoot the league.
Yep.
All
right. Should we talk some Fclass?
Yeah. Hell yeah. Because so much more about that than I do.
So Fclass is a very specialized shooting sport, and it requires very specialized things. Now, and I've sort of mentioned this on, if you follow me on TikTok or on YouTube, I'm 10 to 15 years junior to everybody that's in this sport. I would imagine I'm the youngest person in this sport, if not one of the youngest people doing F class. And so, um, there's people that are very much stuck in their ways on what you should use and things like that. And I say that with the utmost respect because they've also spent 10, 20, 30, 50, $60,000 testing everything out, right? I mean, it's not like they're just like, well, this is what everybody does. Like, they test the stuff out, they figure out what works, and they figure out what doesn't work. So the big thing you'll hear in F class is like, just do what works. And what they mean by that is do what all the pros are doing because they've already tested it out. Don't waste your money, things like that. But a good example of where I don't agree is with the stocks and chassis. They run stocks. So if you're looking like, how am I going to build this thing? There's custom stocks for F
You're
class.
talking like a
They
McMillan
have,
or
yeah, Macmillan, but the key thing is on the front, they're wide.
okay.
They're, for F class, it's a 3 inch wide, right?
That's
And they
beefy.
sit inside of a rest. So because of that, they have custom made things. But I don't really feel like I don't like stocks, right? I like chassis because I like the idea of moving my balancing point.
Mhm.
I like the idea of taking weight on or taking weight off. And a good example of this is I just put on, MK Machining. I put on their, magnifiers. I put on a new scope, leveler or rifle level. Um, and I put on a new, mag that goes in there for single feeding, and that's all different weight that I didn't have on my rifle, and I have a 22-pound limit in open F class, which is why the reason I don't run that the cam thing that you run on yours,
Yeah.
right? I wish I could. I wish I could compete with that and get you guys video of that, but they would count that as weight, right? So everything matters in this. And when I add something on, I need, if I'm overweight, and the other thing is scales are not all the same, right? If my scale here might say I have a 21.5 pound, and then I go there and they're like, you're at 23 pounds. And this is the difference between getting DQ'd and not DQ'd. And at that point, what am I going to do? Take off my magnifiers, which I need to see, right? Take off a sunshade that's now going to put me at a
Yep.
disadvantage. So for me, it makes sense to run a chassis because then I can take 2 exterior weights off or 1 interior weight. And now I'm back at the qualifying level, right? So you can go one of other, however you want to do it. This is what all the pros doing. This is what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to set a trend on this. I'm hoping,
Oh yeah.
uh, and it's better diversity right now. Yeah, these rifles are really designed for F class, but if you wanted to take it out and shoot PRS, it's not going to shoot bad. It's not going to be designed for PRS. And the key thing here is if you have a PRS stock or not a F class stock, it's not going to translate well over to PRS. But if you're shooting an MDT ACC like I am, well, I could do that because now I have versatility, right?
Yep.
So maybe I'm not the best person to ask about stocks on that and chassis on that front, but that's my opinion and my philosophy on it. So you need a high end stock or chassis. If you're going to go stock and they're F class, they're always bedded. They're always really personalized to what you're doing. They're very nice and they sit about $1,500 to $2,000
So about the same
for
as a
the
good
stock.
chassis.
Yeah, they sit at right about the same price. I wouldn't say that F class is too much more expensive when it comes to the build itself. Maybe a little bit more because you have a lot more flexibility, right? Like if I, and granted, I've never shot your scope, but I will say because I run a $1,500 or a $3,500 Collis, I can shoot in F class right now. If I had any worse visibility through my
Yeah.
scope, I would really wouldn't be able to shoot F class, because of the distance, right? And then when the mirage picks up,
Mhm.
when the wind picks up, it really changes a lot of stuff. So you need to figure out that, and you need to figure out like how set are you on wanting to do F class, right? You really, really want to do it, or are you like, back and forth? Then you need a front rest. Now, I do not have a front rest, but all of the pros use a front rest. Now, you can get front rest for under $1,000, but they're still expensive, right? It would be almost the equivalent of buying those Sky Pods, but you need a front rest. Now, is it required? No, but it's what they use to win. Okay.
So
Now
there's
I run my. Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say there's a difference between mandatory because it's a league requirement and
Yes.
mandatory because it is the best tool for the job, right? Like,
Hmm.
the only thing we've talked about at all today is that, like, hey, in the production PRS, you have a $3,000 gun cap and a $2,500 scope cap.
Yeah.
You don't have to run anything in PRS aside
Hmm.
from what the division you want to shoot qualifies you for. And I'm sure the
Right.
same goes for Fclass, right?
Hmm.
But at a certain point, like, there's a reason why everyone's got sky pods, and there's a reason why
Hmm.
everyone has front rests, right?
Hmm.
You kind of you see the company that's innovating and putting products that are moving us forward, and you
Right.
buy the product that does the most jobs,
Right.
which that front
Yep.
front
I agree
rest,
with you.
really seems to be what you guys have to have.
Yeah.
I
The
would lose my
reason the
mind.
front reason the front rest is so prevalent is it has a extension arm that comes from the front, and it twists and it turns and like this, and that's what adjusts the front for you, right? So let's say you're on unsteady ground, and I have this a lot with my bipod. I shoot, it sinks in, or it shifts left and right because it's on rocks or gravel or whatever. And now it's really like I really have to adjust everything, have to readjust my body to get back on. With this thing, I just literally twist and move, and now I'm back centered, right? And really, the difference between this thing, I've had a couple opportunities to shoot off my friends, and first shot down the barrel was an X, right? And that's at 1,000 yards. That's inside a 6-inch ring. Um, and when I'm shooting off my bipod, I have to be very, very purposeful with what I'm doing. I have to make sure like everything, like, am I pulling the trigger at the exact right time? Am I at the same time every single time? Is my body in the same position every time? Is my shoulder like it's just, it makes it a little bit easier, a little more accurate. But you need that. Now, there's really two main players in that field. That's Seb, SEB. So the Seb Neo X is what I'm looking at, but they make FTR, which is a different discipline of F class. Slides, the one that slides back and forth.
Mhm.
They make a mini version of it. So there's different options on that. But the one that I want, probably when it's all said and done, is $2,000.
Oh, God,
So
that hurts
two
for a
thousand
bipod.
dollars for for the elite front rest. And then even if you want the other company, which is Rex, REX, they make a front rest and it's $2,000.
No.
So for the best front rest, that's what you're going to be paying. Now I run like you said, the MDT bipods in the front, which is really versatile, allows me to be able to compete. If I didn't have those, again, it would be more difficult. This is why I'm glad I went high end for the PRS build in the first place.
Mhm.
I also run on the back the adjustable bag rider. Now, this is starting to gain a lot more popularity in PRS, what I'm seeing, but originally it was more closely designed for extreme long range. And you're seeing it a lot more like with sort of rookie people like me and F class and things like that. But in the last year, it's been made illegal. So you can't use it in that sport anymore. And I don't know if they're going to change that or what's going to happen. I'll pretty much be shooting illegal for half the year until I can get my Seb. But it is what it is, right? I want to compete, and I'll get DQ'd. I don't care. I'll know what my scores are. So it is
Yeah.
what it is.
I mean,
Yeah.
even if you're not shooting for match points, right? You're
Yeah.
shooting for the experience because the experience matters more than the match points,
Yeah.
right? My goal is to hopefully shoot a 2-day PRS pro match this year, just one,
Mhm.
to say to get it under my belt and get that
Yeah.
experience, right?
Yeah. That's great.
Am I
So
ready?
it,
No, but
yeah, well,
like
that's how I feel every
it,
time I shoot, honestly.
bro,
Yeah.
preaching to the choir. But
Yeah.
for like you're out of spec, right?
Yeah.
What else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
This is the league you've chosen to compete in.
Mhm.
You love it. You're into it. Like, yeah, of
Mhm.
course you're gonna put as much as you can onto that.
Yeah.
and just
And
go.
it's honestly really unfortunate because it wasn't legal at one point, and from far as I can tell, there's no reason that it should be illegal.
No.
And it is such an outstanding piece of kit. Literally, the amount of adjustment you can get from just like very small like it's so outstanding, and it's sort of a real bummer that even when I do get my front rest, that I'm not going to be using that on the back end because I've really grown to enjoy it, particularly because when you sit with the rifle in your shoulder, I'm right-handed, so my right hand's on the trigger, my left hand comes under, and I place my hand on that, right? And it sort of sits right there. It's such a comfortable positioning for me. So when I do get this front rest, I'm gonna have to retrain positioning to be comfortable there. But you need a chassis or a stock, one of the two. You need the front rest, and then what goes into the rifle is sort of up to you. Now, I run the two-stage trigger
Hmm.
from from Diamond Tech, Trigger Tech.
Trigger Tech. We run the
Yeah, Trigger
diamond.
Tech, but the diamond version, and that's one of the elite PRS triggers, and it runs really great. I haven't had any problems with it, but I know a lot of the F class guys are not running those triggers, so I don't know. I don't have enough experience to say like why this trigger is so much better. I've been learning a lot more.
Mm.
There's a lot of things about clearance and tolerances and spring pressure and how those make a difference, and how putting your pins in will warp the actual trigger and put pressure on the gauges. I don't know. I'll
Yeah.
figure it out eventually, right? But I like that trigger. It is relatively expensive, almost
Oh,
$300
they're
for that
crisp
trigger.
as hell, though.
But yeah, they are really nice. And for me, I'm a big safety person. My biggest fear is not being able to spend the rest of my life with my wife because I have to go to prison for accidentally killing somebody at a
Yeah.
gun, at a something I'm doing at a gun thing, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm really like, I put when I travel, I put locks in over my
Hmm.
rifles. I have it on my case. When I'm at the range, I'm very like that, and I like the two-stage trigger because these guys will run really, really light
Yep.
triggers. And for me, I don't want that. I want my finger to sit on it very much like you would with the handgun. And then you pull. And for me, I'm comfortable there. I don't really see like I have any problems there. Now, when it comes to, I would say the most important part of this entire equation is going to be your action and your barrel. Um, you need an extremely high end action. Now, there's a lot of different people that have opinions on this, but I run a bad action. Bad action has records for bench rest, which requires higher tolerances than F class does. And it's a very, very well respected, very large company. And that's sort of why I went with them. I was like, yeah, bad actions are great. But there's a lot coming out in the F class world right now. There's sort of a big switch component wise that's happening in F class. And I'm following it very carefully. And it's sort of happening around Eric Cortina and F class John and Speedy, who are like my three favorite people to stalk on social media in this realm. So there's a lot of, and ammo is another example that's sort of shifting as well. But I like the bad action that I have. I don't have any particular reason. And they say that although actions are one of the more expensive things you're going to buy, it's over the long run one of the cheaper things you're going to have because you can run actions for so long, right? Without
Yeah.
needing to switch them out. Then you need what's called a heavy contour barrel. This essentially means it's thick. It's not. It doesn't heat up as much. Like it holds those tolerances better. Typically, you're going to see between 1 and 7 twist to a 1 and 9 twist, and some variance in between there. So you guys might want to note that down. I run a 1 and 8 on a 26-inch barrel for with Krieger and the Wolf Ace system. That's what I run, and I shoot pretty good. I think the reason I'm not doing as well is because I'm not good enough. But that rifle shoots really well, and I figure if I put it into somebody's house, hands that were more competent at shooting, they would shoot really well on it. The other thing that you need, and there's a little bit of debate on this, but it does seem more and more that people are trending this way in F class, is a tuner. Now I ran the Eric Cortina tuner brake when I had the PRS set up.
Mm.
You can't run brakes, again, another illegal thing on F-Class lines. So you run a tuner, you get a lot more kick, but it's fine. And what this does is when you shoot, there's vibrations and sounds that happen through the actions and barrels, and it vibrates. And the general idea is that you can change this thing on the front, and it will bring in that vibration, and it will bring in your grouping. And I just did a tuner test, and it does exactly that. It's crazy. So you typically run a tuner on the front, and then you need, really high end rings because you don't want anything coming off. But unlike you guys, we're not banging them around. So you can I think, get away with a couple things on that front. I run Badger Ordnance rings, which are really high
Oh,
end.
they're amazing.
Yeah, they're very high end rings, but they're great rings. Look at this guy's got some hanging around. Oh, we get letting the dog in? No. Yeah, Badger Ordnance rings. And then the key thing, and I'm not sure that you talked about this either, but in F-Class, I run a 5 to 25 I Collis DLR.
Yep.
And that's the upgraded eye, which it has a bigger view.
Yes.
Best way to think of that.
Yeah.
And that's perfect it's in first focal plane, and it is a mill scope. And I ran that because for PRS, and I can still run that very competitively at mid range, 600 yards, which is what I'm doing this year. But at 1,000 yards, it fades away. It's just, I can't be competitive enough. So if you're gonna get a scope, and I would say, at least get like a mid-level scope, but it needs to be at least 40 power. That's where you need to be sitting at a minimum. And again, I can shoot at 1,000 yards, and I can hit, and I can get 10s, and I can get X's, but I'm at a disadvantage against these guys that can go up to 40, 50 power.
Now, are you seeing the holes in paper when you make your impacts?
I can't see the holes on paper past like 300 yards.
Okay.
Yeah. I just went out and shot 300 yards, and I could only see it once I got maybe 10 rounds on, and that's only because the groupings were good enough to
we're
like
cutting
destroy
the hole.
The paper in that area.
Yeah.
So it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? But yeah, we run at least the competitions that I've been on, you either have somebody down there placing it, and then somebody's telling you where you're ending up, or what you're starting to see a lot more now is the actual digital screens that they put up, so you can see exactly where you're hitting. And I really think that's how it should be, because it's really a pain in the ass to run these relays where everybody has to go like back and like up and down and up and down. Just leave it up, let everybody shoot, and go back down. I think that's how it should be.
Yeah.
But there's more senior people in the sport that sort of feel that's against the nature of the sport.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it ends up. But yeah, scope wise, I'm looking at the March 8 to 80 Majesta. It just came out, the new upgraded version this last year. It is a $5,000 scope. It is second focal plane. I'll be switching over to MOA because that's what everybody's shooting and at this discipline.
Really shooting second focal plane?
Yes, second focal plane MOA. I like first focal plane.
Yeah.
Honestly, I really don't. And again, I'm learning a lot about scopes right now. And I actually put the math together for the difference between a mill and an MOA at every 50 yards, from 50 yards to 1,000 yards, and what's the difference in sizing on that.
Yeah.
And I'm planning on putting a video out on that because I'm genuinely very curious about it. Because you'll hear people like, oh no, mill's better, MOA is better, whatever. And I'm like, I really don't know, because I don't have $2,000-$3,000 scopes to compare them.
I mean, I have been set on that because I've shot both mill and MOA, competitively. But the reality is, is mill is faster. You get more elevation out of it. But its advantage is in the reticle, where you get smaller differences in your holds. Minutes is an inherently more accurate measuring system, which is why for you guys in F-Class, it makes sense, right? Because you're doing quarter minutes, right? 1 minute is like 3/10 in a mill, right? So if you're doing a quarter minute, Like that is so far below a tenth that it's hard to mathematically break down.
Sure.
So for you guys, where those tiny incremental changes make a huge difference, abso-fucking-lutely. Like that is what you need to do really well. For me, where I'm shooting a target at 400, 600, and 900, having something where I can use holdovers or dial quickly makes a bigger
Right.
difference.
Yeah, and the same thing like first focal plane, right? That's why you see that more on your guys' discipline because it's a quicker acquisition. But what you have to remember for F class is there's only three real ranges for F class. You have 600, which is mid range. You have 1,000, which is long range, and then you have Palma, which is where you shoot 800, then you go back to 900, then you go back to 1,000, right? So you don't have to shoot all those, right? Like I'm only shooting mid range this year, which means that's why second focal plane like doesn't. I don't really care
Yeah.
because like the 8 to 80 is designed where the math is at 80,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
So that's what people are going to shoot at 1,000 yards. So you don't. It's not like you have to do conversions. But if I took that scope and I went to shoot PRS with you, yeah, I would be all over the
Oh,
place.
you'd
I
be
wouldn't be able to do it.
hosed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually think I might keep both scopes, and I don't know. I love my Collis.
Dude,
I really don't
I
want to
mean,
sell it, but
Collis is the tactical line for Swarovski, right? So you have some ridiculously good glass in that optic. You know what I mean? When I talked about the three high end optics that I would purchase if I were to upgrade, the reality is because you're getting a higher level of performance out of the glass. The March glass. Oh, excuse me. Hey,
attention. That's
oh,
what he
she's
wants. Give me
so mad
attention.
that someone
Yeah.
else has my attention. Come here, Storm. um, the reason you get something like a ZCO or a Collis or an attacker from Night Force is because the glass is almost second to none. March uses really really great glass, but like there's no way I'm running an 80 power. Are you kidding me? Like I would lose my mind.
Yeah, it
You
wouldn't
know
make any sense for you.
that
You wouldn't be able to see anything. You'd be like
no
seeing a
never.
screw on the board or something.
Yeah, I would see
Yeah.
the screw on the mount of like the
Yeah.
target holder, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it'd be like,
exactly.
no way is that going to help
Yeah.
me, right? I mean, I'm running my maximum magnification on both of my optics. I run the same optic on both rifles. Actually, all three rifles. My gas gun too is 29, and I run all of the scopes at 20 power. The reason being, it gives me
Yeah, that's what I hear. Normally 15 to 20 is
yep.
what PRS guys are running at.
15 is good when you're first starting, so you can find the targets a little bit better. 20 is really good when you want good, strong wind holds. If it's a high wind day and I'm shooting at 1,000 yards for a target, I might push it to like 25, right towards that top end of the optic. But realistically, I'm not really going past 20 for hardly anything, right? But if I tried to come out and shoot F class with you and shot at 20 power, I'd be dead. I'd be dead in the water.
So that's the rifle build, but here's the distinguishing factor when going into F class and bench rest versus PRS. You have to reload.
Yeah.
It's not like and granted, people are reloading in PRS and
Yep.
they're good reloads and things like that, but the margin of which you have to hit is far greater than what we have to hit at.
Yeah.
And so the reloading is far more. The highest level of reloading that you really need to do, and because of that, you might get out. You might be able to get your rifle for, let's say, $6,000 to $11,000, then throw an optic on top of that at probably $3,000 to $4,000, maybe 2,500. So I mean, I really say you're looking at about 12 to 15,000 to get a competitive rifle, but then you have to reload, and you can't skimp on that.
No.
So that's an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in reloading
Yep.
equipment to get the highest end. Now we could go back and forth, right? Like I have the Super Trickler; it's a relatively newer, but I run the scale as the highest level scale. Super Trickler runs really well. They say it competes just as well as any other one.
So
But
you've
it's
got that
not the
FX
Prometheus.
120 scale.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I have. That scale.
That's what I'm gonna do also.
But The Prometheus, which is what Eric Cortina has, is a $5,000 powder measure.
Yeah.
So, do I have the highest level one? No. I actually don't even see him use that a lot of the time. Maybe that's part of the trade secret. But nonetheless, like Fclass John, who's his buddy, doesn't run that, and he won the Southwest Nationals. So, not this year, but last year. So, you don't really need to get that, but you have to get really, really high end reloading stuff. And like the difference in that is you could get in PRS, you could probably get away with like, $180, $200 die. You're looking at $400 for a die for PRS, right?
I don't know where I put the paperwork, but I just took a reloading class because I just learned how to do it. And I think the entry level PRS recommended reloading setup was like $2,500, $2,800, right? And it was a Hornady like kind of kit setup with some nicer parts here and there. And then the top of the line, like you were saying, $10,000.
And granted, keep in mind, right? Like again, I mentioned this at the beginning. I am here to compete, right? That's my whole thing. I'm a competitor. So, could you get away with what you're getting? Probably, right? If you're okay with dropping shots and things like that, and you're like, I just want to go out, have some fun for the next 10 years and just see how I can do with as good of equipment I have and see how good I can personally get. That's what we're trying to get people into, right?
Yeah.
That's where we want people, because very, very, very small amount of people want to become a pro and national qualifier and world champion type of shooter. So that's where we want to focus. And that's why I don't talk about that stuff a whole lot. But for myself, who I do want to make a national team and I do want to try to make a world team and things like that, there's no skimping out. And so, you're looking at about 10 to 15,000. And I still am missing a couple things, right? You can get the iDot, which does more precise trimming inside the brass and things like that. That's a $1,500 piece. I'm adding on the amp mate. That's a $500 piece. I'm gonna get the arbor setup because I don't have that currently, and so the arbor, the annealing made perfect press that they have, that's $1,200-$1,300. Then a $500 die that goes with that. So I'm still, even with everything I have, I'm still looking at probably another $3,000 to $4,000 of equipment that I need to get, probably putting me closer to 2,000. And then the last real distinguishing difference in this is ammo, right? There's a lot more flexibility, and you could talk to this more in the ammo usage that you can have. And this is where a lot of things are sort of shaping up oddly. I think it's sort of been decided that PRS most prominently shoots at 6mm. That's sort of like a really good competitive round for what you guys are doing in distances. And right now you're seeing a lot of stuff sized up to 7mm in our division. And you're seeing a lot of Wildcat rounds that are like 6.5 that are sized up to 7mm and things like that. So it's really interesting. But in order to be competitive, and this might vary because I don't know what everybody's doing, and like we've both said, it's a very limiting sport, right? There's thousands of people shooting this, and there's like 15 of us talking about this. Pretty much has been decided that Burger bullets, Lapua brass, and like CCI primers.
I've got the book right there. Like,
there you go. CCI primers or like bench rest level primers or whatever is what you would shoot with. And the difference of that is like a box of 100 bullets of Hornady might cost me like 40 something dollars. And a box of Burger are gonna cost
it's a couple
me
$100.
No, it's not that much. It's like $60. 65.
See, I thought 500,
like
500 Burger was.
Oh no, I said 100.
Oh yeah,
100.
okay.
Yeah, 100. I'm trying to use lower numbers here. Because most of you are probably gonna buy rounds in hundreds, but when you start competing, you buy in 500s and thousands. It switches. But if you're gonna buy 100, it's about 20 something dollars more for these bullets, and that's just the bullet, not the casing. So those components really add up, and you're going from right now with the 147s that I reload, I think I'm averaging 95 cents to 110 is somewhere, depending, like when I have to buy new stuff that comes in, it sort
Yeah.
of lowers that, but it's somewhere around there. I think once I get into this higher grade stuff, it's gonna put me closer to like $1.50 around.
Oh, reloading doesn't actually save you money at the level we're playing the game, right?
Yeah.
What it does is it gives you a higher level of consistency, right? The guys I know shooting six dasher who are PRS pros have a standard deviation of 5 feet per second, which is insanity. And I'm sure some of the top F class guys are shooting even less SD than that, right?
Yeah, they're good. You and I both, right? We're
Yeah.
both, I think, and this is sort of the unique perspective is you can go right now on YouTube and watch all like some top guys who are world champions or whatever, but you're not going to get a lot of detail out of them. Like I have to watch a lot of stuff, read a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
stuff to get the most finite information. And you and I are trying to put out really dense stuff that's relatable, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, like reloading is the thing that you and I are both very new at. And even though like I bought this stuff, I haven't had to reload a lot yet because I had bought so many rounds when I started.
Yep.
So, yeah, my standard deviations are sitting between 10 and 12,
Yeah.
which is what's really screwing me up. And I need to get those into single digits, right?
Yeah.
If I can get my goal this year is if I can get out to 5 matches, right? Because there's not a lot of 600, 1,000 is a lot more prominent. But if
Oh
I can
yeah.
get out to like 500-600 yards, I might do 1 or 2,000 yards,
Yeah.
and then I can get my standard deviations under 10 or sitting like consistently at 10 at these 1-4. Because again, there's only so good you can reload certain
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
right? I have Hornady brass, I have Hornady bullets, and they're great, but they're not the best. And so,
No.
if I can do that, then I'll feel pretty accomplished this year, and that'll
Yeah.
be a big step forward for me going into 2025.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I start really reloading, which will be either later this year or beginning of next year, it's going to be Burger Bullets, the 105 grain hybrid match round.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be Peterson Brass. They're here in Pennsylvania. They're local. I'd like to support local, but you can use Peterson, Lapua, or Apex Brass. All three are going to be, top tier brass manufacturers. For those individuals, and this might actually help you in F class, there is an ammunition company called Trace Ammunition that's out right now. That is someone hand loading rounds and selling them in boxes of 20. And then what you can do, they're like $45 a box, maybe a little bit more. So they're expensive, right? However, when you're done, you can send him back the brass, and for $35 a box, he'll reload them and send it back to you. Which
I
is
should do that,
yeah,
so I can get more use out of my reload.
well, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
The guys I know shot some of his six dasher at a pro match and had the same standard deviation as the rounds they're hand loading themselves, right? So for someone who may not have the time to reload but really wants to play the game and do well, you're getting a single digit standard deviation out of whatever round you buy from the guy at Trace. Why not try it, right? I've thought about ordering some of his ammo for 223 just to test it, right? Run it at the gas gun and see how it does. Because for that, I've been running either Hornady match ammo or IMI, so Israeli munitions industry. They're 77 grain 5.56. My plan for next year is to reload my 6 mil Creedmoor with the 105s and reload Burgers, the 85.5 grain 223 into that for the gas gun stuff and really push the gas gun to like the max a 223 gas gun can do.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I see people doing, I think 150 grain burgers.
oh yeah.
That's what I'm seeing with a lot of the pros. I think it's 150 grain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so out of touch with what F class is doing. I don't want to speak to it, right? Because like I'd be the asshole who's just pissing in the wind.
That's me, dude. I'm the asshole.
Yeah,
You can't be
yeah.
the asshole. I'm the asshole in F class. All right,
dude. I'm the asshole in PRS.
Can't be two of us.
You kidding me? I set up my tripod properly for a tripod rear support, and the fucker falls over. Like, how does that happen? Like,
And that was brutal too. But I actually thought that was like a really interesting thing because that stuff's going to happen, right?
Yep.
Particularly on like breezy days.
Oh yeah.
I've had stuff fall over, my tripod fall over on windy days, right? 15, 20 miles per hour,
Yep.
blow that thing over. And I thought you like handle the recovery really well. Like I think that's the real world stuff that we need to see,
Yep.
right? I would even like to see that in training videos, like scenario training, because it's
Yeah.
always the same. Like, this is how you shoot off your knees, this is how you shoot on your hills, like, you know, Christmas tree, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, have somebody come over and like kick your tripod over, and then you have to like pick it up and shoot or something, you know, like that would be interesting.
So I help teach not an introduction to NRL 22, but the advanced NRL 22 class at my local range.
Mhm.
Myself and a gentleman named Kevin, who is another top level competitor, he and I were doing that. And one of the drills we wanted to do with students, we ran out of time in the last class, but it is working into the curriculum, where we're going to put tape over their windage knob and then just twist it. And now all what they have to do is squeeze the trigger and watch where their round lands, because there's no wind calls in PRS, right? When you are on the clock, the only thing you hear is impact and then like, hey, time, you're done, you're out, right? So you're on your own. And that's a really good indicator, even for NRL 22. The rules are the same, right? So if we go and we fuck with your windage, it's going to simulate a wind, and you cracking off that shot, seeing where you missed and making that adjustment and doing the same thing all the way out, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
you know, it's like what you were saying. If someone comes and kicks out the tripod out from under you, like, what are you going to do? Get mad about it? No, man, shoot the fucking stage.
I will say though, for the only requirement at my range for these clubs, right? Because they're clubs, and you sort of have to follow the club rules. It's not the range; it's the club. It's at the range, and they
Yeah.
follow the range rules. But you have to have a one MOA rifle, and you
Yep.
have to have your dope. That's the only real requirement. So if you are out and you have to have, like, you can't go out there with a 50 cal, right? You have to have like appropriate.
You mean my
appropriate
3.3
size.
Lapua is not going to cut it?
Yeah, exactly. So you have to have the appropriate size, but most people do, right? People are not buying like crazy stuff like that. So they essentially say, and this is what they did to me when I first went out, because the PRS, and granted, this might have developed because it's been a while since I've been out there, but when I was going out there, they're not doing like positional shooting on still. They're actually just doing like 200 all the way back. So 200, 300, 400, all the way to 1,000.
Yep.
So you get to shoot at each area at a target. And so you can make sure your dope is on. And so you get like a good line of sight to see like how far are things this far back. And so that's originally how I started. And that's what they told me. They're like, hey, you have to have your dope down. And I was very, very worried, because the only dope I had was dope that I had gotten from like my Kestrel and from online programs, that essentially I put in like, this is the ammo that I bought, and this is the rifle that I have, and and it was luckily pretty close.
Yeah.
But even then, I was still like, I didn't really know how to adjust. I'd never done any like training when it was like, I didn't know. I knew generally, but I kept going like, okay, if I go down, that means I'm going left, and if I go up, that means I'm going right, and this is up and this is down. I'm like having to like do that in my head, right? So practice that shit before you go out. But the thing is that, and then if you don't have that, if you've never gotten your dope before, make sure you talk to whoever's running practices. Go to a practice first, don't go to a match. But go to a practice and say like, hey, I've never done this before. And likely what they'll end up doing is starting at the 100. And they'll open up the 100, and they'll make sure that you're hitting center on the 100, and then they'll help you like on the way back. And that's where I like, everybody's super nice on that. But yeah, it's a bit intimidating. And actually, you told that story earlier about putting that brake on and having problems.
Oh God, I know.
I had a similar thing happen at practice, where I put the EC tuner on, and I didn't go re-zero or anything like that. And two things happened. That happened, and I so the way that my scope is aligned is, you know, you can do 3 full rotations on it. And so I have mine in the middle. I don't have it all the way set back. Okay, because I don't go over 9 mils. So it's
Yeah.
not like I'm going to go up like 22 mils on this
Yeah.
thing, right? So my train of thought when I did that, I was like, okay, if I ever have like, some sort of like weird wind that's carrying me up, I can click back from the zero or
Yeah.
where I think I'm at or whatever. That was sort of my train of thought. Well, the problem with that is I forgot to adjust back down to zero. So I was a whole 10 mils up
Yep.
and I was all over like, and they were like going to kick me off the line. It was a whole thing. I was very embarrassed. It took me 15 shots to get back on. It took me about like 8 and then I was like, okay, clearly I'm off right now. And I dialed it all the way back, and then I dialed all the way back to where I was supposed to be. And then I got back on, and then I had to get re-zero because not zero, but I had to get re-back on because I think we started at the 400.
Yeah.
So I had to get back on at the 400, and I had to get this break, in the right spot for it. So it was a whole thing. So I'm right there with you, man. I had my moment, and it was rough.
Yeah. I
Luckily,
mean,
I wasn't competing.
but it's still like it shakes your confidence, right? Because
Yeah,
90% of performing well at these matches is just being confident in your ability. Uh, and like, yeah, that really that fucks with your head, right? It
it was
spirals you.
very rough.
But
But luckily, it was at the beginning, right? So,
yeah,
uh, I was pretty embarrassed for like 400 and 600. But by the time I got to 1,000, I was hitting on, and then I left being like, okay, that was embarrassing. Let's not do that again. But at least, I
yeah,
recovered.
yeah, and you can. It's like, okay, I can do this, right? My next match, I'm going to go into it. I'm going to trust my instincts. I'm going to trust my Kestrel on its calls, and I should get hits. No major issues getting hits,
Yeah.
right? And that will be the big like, whew, okay, I'm not as dumb as I think I am.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty dumb. There's a reason I shoot PRS and not Fclass. Like,
No, I don't think so. I think honestly, anybody that's willing to go out there and shoot, I think has a higher level of just like situational
yep,
awareness, a little higher level of IQ, these sort of things. Like you're holding a firearm that can kill people, right? So I think these like people are very like that's why I like the competition area, right? Because you can get some dickheads that'll go out hunting and you get some situations where they might shoot each other on accident or whatever, right? But like it's very like people are doing a really good job here. You have all the safety officers that are there, and we should do another one of these where I want to talk about the different complexities of like PRS versus F class
yeah,
because there's things in F class that are more difficult innately, and there's things in your discipline that are more difficult. And like a good example of this is physicality, right? Like
yeah,
flexibility, mobility, strength through movement are all really, really important in your discipline. And if you don't have those, and if you're like gassed out just walking around with the rifle, then that's different. But for me, if you look at the people that are competing in the sport, and this is not me talking shit on people in F class, but they're not as physically fit as the people that are doing PRS, right? Because it takes a different level of discipline. It takes a lot more breathing control. It takes a lot more focus. It takes a lot more patience, things like that. So I do think that there's some interesting components to talk about on that. And I have a huge regard for all people who do shooting sports, but PRS will always have like a little special place in my heart because that's what I really wanted to do. And unfortunately, I couldn't because of my health. And that's why I sort of transitioned over. But it is a lot more aligned with I actually like to do. So it worked out
I
well.
I do think you probably could shoot PRS if you had, you know, stuff to help you, right?
Yeah.
Like, so one of the big things I did, Geisley is a really big range, you know, for the war rifles matches. MKM is a really big range. Sheepdog, not so much. But there's a lot of really expansive facilities that we shoot at. I bought a stroller and I have my gun cart where like my gun goes on the stroller, my bag goes in, and I'm pushing that instead of carrying all this heavy shit, right? Because I want to be fresh, I want to be dialed in, and I want to be mentally and physically prepared to shoot the stage, right? So doing things like that, I think would help because it's your back that's hurt. Would help you be able to
Yeah.
go into that stage without having those problems. I think
Yeah.
something we should try to coordinate in the future maybe is like collectively both go shoot a PRS match together, and then
Yeah.
like I'll come shoot a fucking F class match and
Yeah.
do terribly, but why not?
I probably do. You'll do as well as I do on bipods. I would imagine, maybe better. I don't know.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
the thing that really sort of got me was there was a training day that was happening at the range. Again, I don't know if this is rules for the still matches that they have, are they out there or whatever, but I had signed up and they said no carts, no carts, no anything. You have to carry all of your gear.
Really?
And they were doing a very similar thing. It was going to be an all day, like 8 hour day. And I was like, there's just no way I'm going to be able to do that. And I was like,
Yeah.
I have to pull out. I can't do it. And so I know that like some places, because I watch, competitions,
Yeah.
and I know that sometimes they have carts or whatever, but I was just like, I can't deal with the like, it's sort of embarrassing. Like I sign up and then I have to drop out because of, whatever. But it's all good, man. It's all good, baby.
Yeah,
I
but
don't really
that's
mind.
that's
It's
some
fine.
bullshit, right? Like I haven't ever been to a range or a match that's been like you can't have this, right?
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I asked, and they even asked the like director or whatever, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't want them out there." I don't. They must have had something happen in the past where they're tearing up the grounds, or
It's got to be
I
something
really
weird,
don't. Yeah, I
right?
really don't know, but they told me like, the guy, he did ask for me, but they were like no. And so it was fine. And again, this is not indicative of what goes on there all the time, but it was the instance I had on this training that I wanted to go out
Yeah.
to. So F class and bench are so much easier. You park up, you literally walk your rifle 10 feet up, you put your rifle down, you walk your rifle 10 feet back, and you're done. Like that's very easy.
You know what?
So
That's it. We're bringing you out to New Jersey. You're gonna come shoot a rimfire match.
right now my goal is to shoot in England.
Oh, dude, my younger brother lives in Scotland, and I want to go shoot a match there so bad.
That's what we should do. We should go shoot in
Yeah,
Scotland, dude. So my wife's family, and we have a property in England,
that's awesome.
is right next to the Bisley. I always say the Bisley or
I'm not
Beasley
sure.
range that's out there.
Okay.
And it's their long range. That's where when they go do these 1,000 yard
Yep.
matches, they shoot at this range. And so I've been trying to connect with people that are in the industry that are out there and be like, yo, like, because the last time I called, it's sort of like most long ranges. You have to know the club people there.
Yeah.
And so I called over, and they're real. It's like old school English shotgun,
Yeah.
like old school. That's their main thing there. And that's who I got the line to. And they're like, oh, yeah, like we can't get a hold of that person right now. Sorry. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going there this time. But the next time I go, that's my goal, is to go out there and shoot.
So I went over to Scotland for Thanksgiving this year, and oddly enough, I have like English and Scottish national PRS champs following me now on Instagram because of just being in that area and the algorithm working the way it does. I'm with you. NRL 22 is an international league, much like PRS is, and they have clubs in South Africa, England, like all over the place, Australia, and the English club is like 45 minutes to an hour outside London. And I was like, so how do I make this happen? Because
Yeah, I think that's probably the same club, because we're only 15 minutes, 20 minutes train ride to London.
yeah,
And we're 30 minutes from that range.
yeah,
It's sort of a weird thing. And I did that video where I said Eric Cortina won't coach me.
yeah,
That YouTube video I put up. Because they had the world champion for F class on there in like 2008 or 9. And he's from England. And so I was like, it's very odd that I'm literally live in both places the same distance
from both.
like it's not like there's a lot of 1,000 yard ranges in England, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's England. It's a very strict place, and they don't have a lot of land.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's, to me, it's super odd. Like, does nobody else see this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm near like the only 1,000 yard range in California that's public, the only 1,000 yard range in England that's public. Like, it's a very weird situation.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm really lucky being where I am, and that, like, Sheepdog is 3 hours, Guiseley is 2 hours, New Holland is an hour and a half, MKM is 5:45. There's a lot of really good long-range ranges really nearby. But that's also, I think, one of the reasons why you see so many top-tier PRS shooters come from the East Coast. is because there's just a higher density of these ranges, and there's a higher density of the shooters, right? Like if you were living in Idaho or Montana,
California is a good example.
Cali,
Yeah.
there's so much less of them. You've got to really plan those matches, and it becomes less accessible because of that.
Well, even at the range I'm at, I have people that do drive 2 to 3 hours to come shoot these matches, and I feel bad because I'm 30 to 40 minutes away. And I'm planning when we upgrade our home, we're gonna likely end up trying to buy closer to the range.
Yeah.
So I'll hopefully only be about 15, 20 minutes away.
Yeah. My local club where I do NRL 22 is 10 minutes down the road. So I like roll out of bed, my shit's in the car overnight. I'm like, all right, let's go shoot some 22.
Time to go. So
yeah.
Get you on that. Well, dude, super fun.
Oh, brother,
I'm glad we could be
awesome.
on and talk about this. Hopefully we can do more in the future. But hopefully that helps some people, right? Hopefully they feel comfortable now, get out there and shoot.
The big goal, I think, is that this isn't as inaccessible as you think it is. There is a range nearby. There are guns. There is ammo, right? Like, buy some entry-level gear, right? Like, yeah, okay, if you really go balls deep, it's going to be $5,500 between the rifle and the optic. Maybe a little bit more with accessories and ammo. But, like, if you really want to do it, like, shit, go buy a Remington 700 R5 pattern rifle. Throw a decent, throw an Arca rail on it, buy an Arca rail bipod, throw a 20 MOA rail on the top with a decent piece of glass, and go shoot the absolute crap out of that gun, right? Like,
I think perspectively, like, people need to understand, like, I coached swimming for a long time, and I coached year-round swimming, like kids who wanted to make junior Olympics and go to college and stuff. And my coach, the head coach that was there, so I was the assistant coach, she was the head coach. She had been coaching for like 25 years, really, really great coach. She and her husband were super into mountain biking. And not competitively or anything, like recreational, but really into it. That's what they like to do in their free time. They were up in Truckee, which is a big, outdoor area out here where mountains are and stuff like that. And she was telling me that her and her husband were going to buy new bikes, and that's why she wasn't doing a couple things. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, like, how much are they? She's like, oh, it's going to be $20,000 for our 2 bikes. And so people, they see shooting and they think, oh, the price tag is so expensive. The thing is anytime you want to get into like an adult hobby, it's expensive, right? Like, and this is honestly, in my opinion, one of the more cheaper ones. Like, my brother's he's a mechanic, he's a diesel mechanic. If he wanted to do drag racing,
oh my God,
build custom cars or anything, that's like a $50,000, $100,000 hobby, right?
Yep.
So yes, it is expensive, but for usage and how often you get to do it and what you're get to do and who you're doing it with, it's pretty fun. Now I do real estate and home loans, so I'm under no illusion of how difficult it is for most people out in America right now, and that you don't have disposable income. But like you said, right, we want to, what we said today is maybe not the best indicator for, like, don't let us scare you away with these huge price tags. Like you were saying earlier in the show, there's ways to get into the sport and have fun that are more affordable.
Yeah. I mean, hell, gas gun, you could grab a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport and a $600 Vortex low-powered variable option and be competitive, right? Or even Rimfire. Rimfire is the end. It's the gateway drug. Let's be honest, right? Sure. You're going to get a 22. You're going to put okay glass on it, at best, and you're going to go shoot a match and be like, oh shit, this is fun, and then you're going to be, $7,000 into a 22. I'm not going to name names, but yeah.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. Well, anyway, man, it was fun,
brother.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, dude, appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey guys.